Magnitude 6.3 in Ecuador. Imagine waking up, guys, to the ground shaking beneath you, buildings cracking, power lines snapping, people rushing into the streets in panic. That's exactly what happened early this morning on Ecuador's Pacific coast, where a strong magnitude 6.3 earthquake struck the residents there without a warning. But what has caused it? Is there a bigger risk still looming? Stay with me, guys, because right now we're looking into the forces behind this earthquake. And with this region, it is one of the most dangerous in the world when it comes to earthquakes. So at approximately 6:45 a.m. local time this morning, a powerful magnitude 6.3 earthquake rattled the coastal city of Esmeraldas in Ecuador. And the tremor was shallow, and that's a problem because then people feel it way more intense. It had a depth of only 35 kilometers, which made it felt so strong on the surface. And the reports were quickly flooding in, like over 60 homes collapsed. That's the current number, and number is rising. Streets cracked open and power outages swept through neighborhoods. Among these, at least 60 houses that have been destroyed. There were 2 schools that have been destroyed. 2 health centers have suffered major damage, and that is especially bad, especially after a quake like this. People need these health centers, they need help. And over 25 people have been injured so far, have been reported injured so far. More reports will come in because this is quite fresh. But to really understand why this earthquake happened and why Ecuador is facing constant danger from earthquakes, we have to look deeper underground into the hidden world of tectonic plates that are most of the time responsible for stuff like this. So it's caused by tectonic plates because Ecuador sits right on top of one of the most active geological collision zones on Earth. The boundary between the Nazca plate and the South American plate. So both plates are meeting each other right underneath Ecuador, and of course that makes it explosive. And the Nazca plate is an oceanic plate, and it's constantly pushing eastward, and it's sliding underneath the South American continent in a process called subduction. The subduction earthquakes are the ones that I fear the most. I'm sitting alongside the Cascadia Fault, a subduction zone that is overdue to produce a magnitude 9 or higher megathrust earthquake. So they go underneath, and then they're locked. And if they free, they snap. The ground really lifts up and it makes powerful earthquakes and also high tsunamis only 8 to 15 minutes after the big earthquake. But let's get back to Ecuador. So these 2 plates there, this isn't a gentle movement. It's really a brutal, grinding collision where immense pressure builds up over the years or even centuries. And then when the pressure becomes too much for these rocks to bear, it releases suddenly and the ground shakes. And that's exactly what happened in Ecuador today, what we saw in Ecuador. So this subduction zone that we see there is the same one that is responsible for some of the most devastating earthquakes in South America, including the catastrophic 2016 Ecuador earthquake and the, we have to say, legendary, devastating Great Chilean earthquake in 1960, the most powerful earthquake ever recorded. That's what we're dealing here with when it comes to tectonic power. And in today's event, the seismic data shows that the quake's location northeast of Esmeraldas is right along this dangerous plate boundary. And that type of movement that created this earthquake was most likely thrust faulting, meaning the crust there was pushed upward very violently. I just described it, which is typical for subduction zones. And why Esmeraldas? Again, and this has been hit before. This coastal province, unfortunately, has a long history of being hit by earthquakes and seismic activity because it's so close to where this Nazca plate dives underneath South America. And in fact, geologists have mapped many fault lines that are zigzagging through the region. And some of these faults are directed connectly to the megathrust where the plates collide. So while other faults are secondary faults that are caused by the bending and breaking of the crust. But we now know that even if we see an earthquake from these other faults, they can trigger the big one. And when these secondary faults rupture, they can also just by themselves cause major earthquakes. That's what we saw today. And this was the geological side, and you've already seen the devastating pictures. Let's talk about a little bit more about the human side, what has happened to the residents there today. Esmeralda has suffered significant structural damages because homes that are built from weaker materials have collapsed first, and critical infrastructure like the health centers, schools sustained serious damage. Roads and bridges have cracked or were blocked by debris, which makes it harder for support teams, rescue teams to reach the area. The good thing is the government has responded quickly. Shelters are being set up for the ones that are displaced from their homes. Emergency teams have been dispatched to help the affected families. President Daniel Noboa is currently in Rome, but even while being abroad, he ordered immediate humanitarian assistance. And what about a tsunami? Usually there's a tsunami warning when something like this happens. So there was a tsunami warning initially for Ecuador's coast, but thankfully it was later canceled. But still, the authorities are urging people to stay alert for aftershocks. And some of these aftershocks could still be very, very powerful. So this brings us to a very important question. Could this earthquake trigger an even bigger event, like a megathrust earthquake? So there's always the possibility that after this magnitude 6.3 quake, we could see something bigger. Seismologists are emphasizing that today's earthquake seems to have released energy locally along a small fault segment. However, because Ecuador lies along this massive subduction zone, the risk of large earthquakes, even mega quakes above magnitude 8, is always present in the long run. And of course, they're saying, as always, experts are monitoring the situation closely, but that doesn't guarantee you safety. Aftershocks now can continue for days, weeks, or even months, guys. And that's also buildings that might be damaged a little bit with these aftershocks, that might bring them down. And let's zoom out a little bit further. I've talked about this just in one of my previous videos, that there is increased earthquake and volcanic activity along the Pacific Ring of Fire. And guess what? Ecuador is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. And by the way, I put this video in the end screen. It's really interesting. So Pacific Ring of Fire, a horseshoe-shaped zone, famous for its seismic and intense volcanic activity, and about 90% of the world's earthquakes and 75% of the world's active volcanoes are located along this ring. Great, I'm living there. This goes from Japan to Chile to New Zealand. Countries along the Ring of Fire experience constant pressure between tectonic plates, sometimes with very devastating consequences. The west coast of the US, especially like southern British Columbia, states like Washington, Oregon, and even Northern California, they're due for the big megathrust earthquake along the Pacific Ring of Fire. That's why there's so many volcanoes along the west coast of Canada and the United States. The Ring of Fire demands constant preparedness and vigilance. This is what also today's earthquake tells us. It can happen to any of us that live there at any time. And Another thing is, even for people that live further away or far away from Ecuador, why should you even care about this earthquake? Well, even if you're not in Ecuador, events like this matter because, of course, aside what I just said, they remind us how connected the Earth's crust is. And pressure released in one place can sometimes subtly affect distant faults somewhere else. And of course, in a globalized world, natural disasters in key regions can impact supply chains, migration patterns, and even economies, depending on how devastating it is. And they remind us for sure how important it is to be prepared. You know, not only people in Ecuador need to be prepared in Chile or Japan or the West Coast, it's for anyone living near or on top of tectonic boundaries. So what we witnessed today with the magnitude 6.3 was not just random chaos. It was the Earth doing what it has been doing for millions of years, shifting, groaning, and reshaping itself. And unfortunately, Ecuador stands bravely and beautiful as it is on the front line of these unstoppable forces, as we have seen today. And let's hope that the residents of Esmeraldas will recover quickly. And, you know, let's always, I have to say, these poor people, we've just seen it with the other earthquake in Turkey where people were jumping out of multi-story homes because they were so afraid that their homes might collapse. Let's take a moment and think about these poor people and let our hearts go out to them. And, you know, we all have to be aware of this raw power of the planet that we're living on. And guys, I'll keep you updated about this. Check out the videos in the end screen. It's very interesting stuff. And if you'd like to support the channel, check out the links in the description. I have a Buy Me a Coffee site where I support my farm animals and my other animals. Link is in the description. And thanks for the supers you're giving me here. Or click the join button, become a supporting monthly member. I'm giving you behind the scenes videos about my private life and what's going on. And of course, leave a like, subscribe if you're new here. I would love to see you again. I hope you're all doing great, guys. Be safe, be prepared. Bye-bye.